And then Andrew cracks it for him, for once cracking someone's backbone without killing them. Tobey talks about how he fought.
That was so wrong. Why did you do that? What is going on, Funk Nation? It's your boy Funk, and we have some amazing news. We are about to watch the epicness of new Rockstars' epic breakdown of everything you missed in Spider-Man No Way Home. This is going to be a long video, so sit back and relax and let's enjoy this journey together, and let's follow Rockstar and see what they saw and see if it's similar to what we already seen in the movies. This is my first time watching it. This is gonna be amazing. See what I did there? Anyway, but let's go ahead and get into it. Like, I'm gonna tell you, it's a lot of stuff in here that I was gonna do. I said, why not? I'm just gonna watch it. He pretty much put it out there, so I might as well just watch it. Let's go.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Voss, and this is a breakdown of Spider-Man No Way Home, a true Spider-Verse event that, start to finish, is a love letter to the web-slinger's full cinematic history, not only by bringing back past Peter Parkers, but in even subtler ways, echoing little moments that prove how, despite all these guys' different backgrounds, these dorks were destined to cross paths and rescue each other. So I'm gonna break this down scene by scene for everything you might have missed. And folks, I think I found more Easter eggs in this movie than I have in anything I've ever broken down on this channel in 5 years. Okay, the opening Marvel Studios title card has been updated slightly so that if you look closely on the whole of the R, replacing Rocket, who was in recent MCU titles, is now Peter Parker. The moment he came back through that portal to join Cap in Endgame, this movie will also make grown men cry, seeing Spider-Man arrive through portals twice. So we open immediately where Far From Home left off, the audio of the news broadcast of J. Jonah Jameson's Daily Bugle revealing Peter Parker's identity by Mysterio's doctored footage. Director Jon Watts recreated that 2019 scene to near perfect detail before it ended by cutting off Peter's F-bomb. What the which itself was a callback to Aunt May's final line in Homecoming.
What the
But now a car horn censors out the word, and MJ is once again in her Joan of Arc shirt, but the three extras behind her are dressed exactly like the three guys behind MJ in the Far From Home scene. But the one major difference is that MJ now wears the broken Black Dahlia necklace that Peter bought her in Venice and gave to her in London.
I noticed that.
I actually like it better broken.
This necklace is the key to Peter and MJ's relationship because in the final scene, despite her memory of Peter being erased, something compels her to keep wearing that. Proof that she wasn't just with Peter because he was Spider-Man, and that she will wait forever for that I love you because she likes things better broken. Notice how one of the—
Hold on, I didn't notice that. She had that on the last scene. I'm have to go back and I don't recall that. Oh, wow.
To keep wearing that. Proof that she wasn't just with Peter because he was Spider-Man, and that she will wait forever for that I love you because she likes things better broken. Notice how one of the onlookers says, "You're just a kid?" Just like one of the onlookers on the train says in Spider-Man 2 when that Peter got unmasked.
He's just a kid. Just a kid.
Peter swings MJ through Times Square where Jameson's inescapable broadcast includes an image of Peter's face half covered, as it often is in the Spider-Man comics, and they pass two billboards for Rogers the Musical, the Captain America musical from Hawkeye on Disney+. Peter lands MJ on the Queensboro Bridge where they are spotted by passengers on the nearby Roosevelt Island tramway, famous from the 2002 Sam Raimi Spider-Man film as the setting of the final battle where Green Goblin made Peter choose between Mary Jane or suffer the children. And then right after getting that Tobey era reference, we get an Andrew Garfield era reference when Peter thwips the manhole cover, recalling the very last time we saw Andrew Garfield on screen as Spider-Man. This is in front of Del Mar's Deli in Queens, Peter's favorite spot that showed up in Homecoming and in a deleted scene in Far From Home. But notice how it now reads Del Mar's 3 for this being the third Tom Holland Spider-Man movie. Back in their apartment, Aunt May dumps Happy. But then they walk in on MJ and Peter declothed, calling back Aunt May walking in on Peter and Ned just like this in Homecoming. But Jon Watts shoots all of this in a full 2-minute long take to heighten that awkwardness, and kudos to these 4 actors because the timing is so precise. Like when Peter fails to close the window shade the first time, he then thwips it shut, which feels improvised, like Tom Holland screwed up closing it the first time, but then was just like, oh, Peter could thwip it, and then they added in the VFX of the webbing after that. Also notice how Peter wears the same I survived my trip to NYC shirt that he wore in Homecoming as he came back home after Mr. Stark confiscated his suit. It's less baggy on him now because our little guy is grown up. The Daily Bugle broadcasts hammer away at Peter. You see a Daily News front page photoshopping mug shots using their yearbook photos and revealing MJ's name as Michelle Jones Watson. For the first time, adding the Watson like her counterpart Mary Jane Watson. Time magazine calls him Iron Man Jr. and shows him crying like a baby. In Touch Weekly calls him Two-Faced. And then Peter gets doused in green paint, while newsreel footage of Tower Bridge includes the ticker political turmoil continues in New Asgard. So I guess Valkyrie's rule over that colony in Tonsberg, Norway might be a bit unstable, something we could see more of in Thor Love and Thunder. Investigators recover the drones from Far From Home, linking them to Stark, giving investigators grounds to arrest Peter. The DODC returns, Department of Damage Control, who cleaned up Avenger messes in Homecoming, now led by Agent Cleary. Albert Cleary is the DOD.
I want to know who thrust that stuff down when they was like, oh, that's Matt Murdock, Daredevil, you know, and now, you don't even see him in there, so I don't know who that person was, but...
DC comptroller in the comics. They take some evidence photos showing a framed photo of Ned and MJ from the Homecoming dance. Interesting how Peter is not in that picture, though. Keep that in mind. We see Peter's Star Wars figurines. There's a photo taken of the Iron Spider charging station without the suit in it, though. And you see all that tangle of plugs into that one wall outlet. Also, we see the Edith glasses that Mysterio was trying to steal from him, and a bunch of PlayStation games, because Sony. During the interrogation, Peter wears the physics are theoretical but the fun is real shirt that he wore in Spider-Man Homecoming when Tony Stark dropped him off back in Queens. Agent Cleary says Fury's been off planet for the past year, so Peter thought he was talking to Fury during Far From Home, but he was actually talking with the Skrull Talos, also confirming that the DODC is more aware of Fury's movements than most Avengers are. Also, that Agent Cleary just made my list of Skrull suspicious ahead of Secret Invasion, because how else would he know that? Stark Industries, the company itself, gets swept up in the investigation, so I guess Morgan Stark's gonna have to go to public school. The file photo they use of Happy Hogan was his look from Iron Man 3 prologue in 1999 when he had long hair and the bolo tie like Vincent Vega in Pulp Fiction. And blowing our minds in the first 10 minutes, they get legal counsel from freaking Charlie Cox, Matt Murdock, Daredevil from the Netflix series, a crossover even crazier than Tobey and Andrew in my book, because A, this is permanent in the MCU, and B, it presents wilder implications for the MCU, suggesting that much, if not all of what we saw in the Netflix Marvel shows could now be MCU canon. And we just saw Cox's co-star Vincent D'Onofrio appearing as Kingpin in Hawkeye, and that finale episode will apparently give us some clarity on the exact canonicity of all those stories. But to be clear, this Matt Murdock is the superpowered Daredevil. A brick flies in through the window and he catches it with lightning fast reflexes, but I love how Peter's hand was also ready to catch that brick too, since he has Spidey sense. Also, fun fact, Jon Favreau played Foggy Nelson in the 2003 Daredevil. Cool! So they have to move into Happy's condo where he swiped Tony's dumb E-robot that we saw in the first Iron Man.
What if they did that? The multiverse is real now. Ben Affleck's Daredevil is canon.
Film, also recovered in Iron Man 3, and we saw Happy yelling at it in Homecoming. Now, first on the TV, there are some people complaining about the new changes to the Statue of Liberty, which I agree. Why would you add Cap Shield to it? Also, while they're in the condo, Happy watches Downton Abbey, just as he did in Iron Man 3 when he was in recovery, and by the door, he has a bunch of spare security badges hanging. This was after he lectured everyone in Iron Man 3 that they have to have their one badge on them at all times. As Peter and MJ FaceTime, in MJ's room hangs her sketches of Peter with a rain cloud over his head, but also that one of Coach Wilson from Homecoming.
Why are you here? You don't even have detention.
Oh, I know. I just like coming here to sketch people in crisis. It's you.
There's also that same photo of her and Ned from Homecoming, again without Peter in it, and a photo of pigeons in Venice. And on the bed behind her, she is reading Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. In this conversation, Peter mentions his spider bite.
Ever since I got bit by that spider,
For the first
I've only
time
had
ever,
1 week
I noticed that.
where my life has felt normal.
This is actually only the second time in the MCU that Peter really referenced that bite after his chat with Ned in Homecoming.
You got bit by a spider?
Oh.
Can it bite me?
Oh, that's
Well, it
right.
probably
It
would've hurt,
was. Okay.
You know what? Whatever. Even if it did hurt, I'll let it bite me. Maybe. How much did it hurt?
The spider's dead, Ned.
Betty Brant hosts the Midtown Morning News still, a job that she apparently also balances with being an intern for the Daily Bugle on TikTok. And she says, "Go get him, Tiger," Mary Jane's catchphrase for Peter in the comics and in the past films. Also, you can hear someone in the crowd yelling, "Do a flip!" just like that guy in Homecoming. Do a flip! Who also came back in Shang-Chi. The protester signs include several pro-Mysterio ones, one calling Peter
notice that.
Devil in disguise.
Don't
So
say
this
nothing,
movie's
so.
premise
Please
is
don't
loosely
say it.
based on the Spider-Man One More Day comic, in which Peter goes to Doctor Strange in search of a spell to make everyone forget that he's Spider-Man, but ends up having to turn to a little girl who is revealed as Mephisto to do this instead. It actually ends with a similar reset as this film, in which Peter's identity is a secret once more, but at the cost of his relationships with MJ and with his friend. It was a very controversial comic when it came out, but like many great MCU movies, it turned a pretty divisive comic storyline into a really great work of cinema. In the crowd, there's also an MJ supporter. This is a cameo by Darnell Aplin, an actor and Zendaya's real-life assistant. Flash has published a tell-all book called Flashpoint, which is probably a nod to the DC Comics preceding timeline crossover event, with Barry Allen meeting alternate versions of himself and of Batman, which is being adapted into another cross-franchise event with The Flash in 2022. The school's mural of great inventors throughout history that showed Howard Stark in Homecoming has also now added the faces of Abraham Erskine, who is the inventor of Cap Super Soldier Serum, as well as Hank Pym in the upper right corner. Coach Wilson, Mr. Dell, and Mr. Harrington greet Peter with a display case of Peter's academic decathlon awards and his blazer. There's also a photo of Peter and MJ.
I'm sorry, that part with Hannibal Buress, he was like, you know what you did. Mysterio was right. he was like, murderer. Nah, you did this. We don't. Yo, that whole interaction was hilarious.
Jay in Venice, where it looks like Mr. Harrington might have pasted himself in from one of his selfies that he took then. Later on the rooftop, MJ reads a New York Post. That is the salacious tabloid that they actually based the earlier Daily Bugle designs on, reading Peter Parker and his spider minions, showing Peter puppeting Ned and MJ. Below reading, his hypnotic spider senses seduced Jones Watson. Male spiders actually do release hypnosis-like pheromones, and ironically, Peter does allow MJ and Ned to be brainwashed, but to forget about him. Peter rolls over to kiss her, and the textbook that he rested his head on was chemistry. I see what you did there. I thought we wouldn't notice, but well, we did. Also, written in graffiti on the background is Ditko, a reference to Spider-Man co-creator Steve Ditko. Peter gets rejected from college after college. Dumb-E gradually reassembles Peter's Death Star until the MIT one comes in and Dummy just breaks it, just like Ned did. And all three of the friends get rejected, which is a bummer because MIT is Tony Stark's alma mater, where he handed out scholarships in Civil War, and where future Ironheart Riri Williams goes to school. The witch string lights actually have little goatees, making them little Doctor Stranges, giving Peter the idea of what Avenger to return to, and we hear the notes of Doctor Strange's theme here that leads Peter to 1778 Bleecker Street, the Sanctum Sanctorum. Inside, one of the shoveling apprentices is played by Emily Fong, who worked production on Infinity War Endgame's Shang-Chi and Black Widow. Wong arrives and explains how one of the Rotunda gateways opened to Siberia and let a blizzard in. We saw those gateways in the 2016 film. I will say, the production of this movie went to an insane amount of effort to freeze over the sanctum for just a, oh, left the door open to Siberia gag. I'm wondering, with those floodwaters pouring into the sanctum in the Multiverse of Madness teaser, this may be a bigger indicator of this reality destabilizing. Strange floats in wearing a Columbia University hoodie. Columbia is his alma mater. We see another one of these hoodies floating by the laundry machines downstairs, and he's carrying a mug reading, "Oh, for Fox's sake." We learned that Wong actually holds the rank of Sorcerer Supreme since Strange blipped for 5 years. Since WandaVision told us that Scarlet Witch's powers surpass those of the Sorcerer Supreme, that might mean Strange might be even lower on that sorcerer hierarchy than we thought and might need her help even more. Strange says that Peter's request to reverse time is selfish, plus the time stone was atomized, but Peter says, quote, "It's not about me. I mean, this is really hurting a lot of people." In doing so, Peter uses the same words that the Ancient One used in her crucial lesson to Strange.
It's not about you.
And so Strange agrees to help him, using a spell called the Runes of Kafkal. Not sure the spelling, but Kafkal isn't from any of the comics that I know of, but what Wong says, the memory wiping spell travels the dark border between known and unknown realities, suggesting that to enact this spell, you have to kind of bridge with other realities of the multiverse. And he leaves them through a portal. You can see that bell tower in the background. That's actually in the Kamartaj courtyard. Strange explains how the Sanctum is built at an intersection of cosmic energy currents, that they weren't the first to seek this out, with walls thousands of years old, and that they shot an episode of The Equalizer there in the 80s. The spell goes crazy, and Peter shouts, "Basically everyone who knew that I was Spider-Man before should still know." That is the rule by which characters get warped into this reality, also suggesting that Kirsten Dunst, Mary Jane, both Harry Osborn, several others might have also been briefly walking around in the MCU, but also tells us that Venom, through his multiversal symbiote hive mind, must have known that Peter is Spider-Man, though I didn't know when Electro found out that Peter was Spider-Man, unless there's some kind of...
Look, if that's the case, then the Venom from Spider-Man 3 knew that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, and if they all connected through the hive mind, then of course the Venom from the Sonyverse would know that Spider-Man is Peter Parker, and he got blipped. Well, not blipped, but he was sent to the universe as well. So
Spider-Man Mandela effect that I'm suffering from. It's possible. As this purple void surrounds them, Strange sees a glowing silhouette that looks like the glowing arms of Doc Ock, him being one of the characters that are currently spilling into this reality. So Strange has to encase this spell in a prism. Sees a glowing... I didn't know when Electro found out that Peter was Spider-Man, unless there's some kind of Spider-Man Mandela effect that I'm suffering from. It's possible. As this purple void surrounds them, Strange sees a glowing silhouette that looks like the glowing arms of Doc Ock, him being one of the characters that are currently spilling into this reality. So Strange has to encase this spell in a prism, similar to how Strange in What If encases Killmonger, Infinity, and Zola Ultron in a prism to contain that reality rupturing chaos. But this prism is a dodecahedron, which is made up of pentagons with 5 sides and 5 corners because Peter changed his spell 5 times. Strange thought it was 6, but if you listen back, Peter changed it for MJ, for Ned, for Aunt May, for Happy, and then for everyone who knew. That's 5. So what was the 6th? Well, the 6th may have been a secret change by Doctor Strange so that he would still remember Peter because he loves him. At least that's my theory. Peter suits up in the Iron Spider armor, using extra wings to glide the bridge, and inside his heads-up display, you can read up in the corner, Edith offline. Also, the voice has changed to male, and that's because the DODC has confiscated and disabled all the drone network. It's interesting that they did not take this Iron Spider suit too, but again, when they raided his place, that suit was not charging in the port. So I don't know, maybe Peter tried to flush the nanotech down the toilet. Now, on this bridge, there are a ton of license plates, and I can tell you folks, I looked at all of them because John Watts loves to hide Easter eggs in his license plates. But the only ones I could actually decode to mean anything were a Nissan with SEYS1DP, and earlier there was an anagram book on Peter's shelf, so this plate rearranges to Spideys, plural, which could be a clue for multiple Spideys being in this movie. And of course, the MIT woman's car is 63A5M3 or 63ASM3 for 1963, Amazing Spider-Man #3, the comic debut of Dr. Octopus, who arrives in the scene, played once more by Alfred Molina from the 2004 Spider-Man 2. He looks awesome. Composer Michael Giacchino samples Danny Elfman's Doc Ock theme from that film, and as his claws smash through this bridge, note that the claws light up red, which in that 2004 film was how we knew when the claws were controlling Otto's brain. So this must have happened before Peter converted him, at which point the lights flickered back white. Doc Ock brings up his machine here, his fusion device that he was working on in the movie.
What have you done with my machine?
And he quotes his line from the 2004 film, his whole goal.
The power of the sun in the palm of my hand.
Now, at one point, you'll notice Peter webs one of the claws to a car door to make it harder for Doc Ock to grab anything else to throw at him. Doc Ock pries off some of Peter's nanotech, which then absorbs onto his arms. So if you remember back to the first Raimi film, Norman Osborn was an expert on nanotech.
I'm something of a scientist myself.
I read all your research on nanotechnology. Really brilliant.
And in the sequel, Octavius built his arms using Oscorp tech.
I'd like to thank Harry Osborn and Oscorp Industries for providing it.
And he explained how he controls these arms using a neural link.
These smart arms are controlled by my brain through a neural link. Nanowires feed directly into my cerebellum.
And since the Stark nanotech is controlled neurally as well, that would allow Doc Ock's tech to be compatible with it. However, that link goes both ways. So Peter is able to pair with the arms and control the arms remotely. And then Otto snaps at his arms saying, "Listen to me," calling back what he said at the end of the 2004 film.
Listen to me now.
Then Green Goblin swoops in, but Doctor Strange portals them back to the crypt where the lizard is already contained. Doc Ock asks Strange if this is a birthday party, just like Tony Stark referenced Dr. Strange's Jimmy Kimmel bit when they first met.
What is your job exactly besides making balloon animals?
Peter enlists MJ and Ned. Ned asks Dr. Strange,
"How did you know you were made of magic? Because my Nana says that we have it in our family, and sometimes I get these tinglings in my hands."
You should talk to your physician.
And later, Nana's home has a display of ancient blades, and Ned successfully operates the sling ring, which surprises Strange. So yes, it really does seem like Ned might have a future as a sorcerer in the MCU. Then down in the Undercroft, there's all kinds of creepy goodies. A doll turns its head at them. In the fridge are a bunch of creatures. Yes, it really does seem like Ned might have a future as a sorcerer in the MCU. Then down in the Undercroft, there's all kinds of creepy goodies. A doll turns its head at them. In the fridge are a bunch of creatures, a floating eyeball in a jar, a claw creeping out from under foil. MJ finds a goatee guard that Strange must use to get his goatee perfectly shaved. And then MJ goes on TikTok to find people on homemade gliders replicating Green Goblin. Another with a frost giant cosplay display that reads, "I am the green elf." And then at the end of this, they're finally able to track down Electro, where Peter also finds Sandman battling Electro with his suit turned inside out. Sandman helps Peter because they were on good terms at the end of the 2007 film, but Electro, Jamie Foxx, now has a new body looking a bit cooler. And while Dr. Connors later calls it out, since they didn't know each other while they worked at Oscorp in the same continuity, this new body is never really explained in the movie.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Willem Dafoe, Norman Osborn, my favorite actor in this.
The only thing I can think about, let's back up. The only thing I can think about that is, but he's just from, I don't know, a different universe. But he couldn't be from a different universe because they are both a different, could be the same universe, but a different, what they call a variant of that. That's the only thing I could think of, a different variant of that same universe. And they just know each other. He did say he had a comb over, so I don't know.
While Dr. Connors later calls it out, since they didn't know each other while they worked at Oscorp in the same continuity, this new body is never really explained in the movie. Meanwhile, Willem Dafoe, Norman Osborn, my favorite actor in this movie, argues with his Goblin helmet, just as he would in the 2002 film, but the argument ends with him shattering the helmet, but even after it shatters, the Goblin voice laughs, meaning breaking that helmet did not destroy the identity, it just fused it into Norman's soul. Notice the framing of this broken mask as Norman walks away matches the framing of Tobey Maguire Peter leaving.
I said the same thing in the theater. I was like, the way he walked away from that was the same frame of Spider-Man 2 when he said he didn't want to be Spider-Man no more.
His suit behind in the garbage can in the 2004 film, but in both cases, the characters get dragged back into the game. Peter returns to the...
Is it me or that X is representing X-Men? To me, the way that circle and the X is over Peter's face represents X-Men to me. It's just in green. I don't know. It just, that point out to me.
East facility, that's the homeless center where Peter works in the comics and in the games. Someone tagged the sign outside with...
Have y'all noticed everybody saying Mysterio was right and then Thanos was right? Like you see that in the Hawkeye trailers. I mean the Hawkeye movie.
Mysterio was right in a green circle over Peter's head, just like Mysterio's fishbowl helmet. Inside, Norman plays a convincing, mentally disturbed man saying, "Someone's at my house. Oscorp doesn't exist. My son." And he trails off, referring to Harry Osborn, of course, but also telling us that
I felt a certain kind. You know what? It's good storytelling when you feel sorry for the villains, because I literally felt a certain kind of way. I felt sad for him at that time. Because that felt like that was Norman. That was actually Norman talking at that time. I just wish you could have seen. Like, I want to know, when was it when the Goblin was the Goblin? And when was Norman? Like, when was this switch and Goblin was playing Norman? You know, that whole thing. But, oh, well. I think that's when Octavius was brought up, you know, no more second half, no more darker half or whatnot. And then that's when the switch happened. I don't know, but you'll see.
Oscorp, at least any company named that, is not currently in the MCU anywhere. Notice how he wears a green coat over those purple sweats, Goblin's colors. Meanwhile, Aunt May's costume is worth looking at. She's wearing a blue jumper with a red sash. That could be foreshadowing the bloody wound that causes her death. Aunt May tells Peter,
I was thinking that was going to be his outfit.
Help Norman. Peter says, "This isn't my problem," which she gets.
Yep, I was like, he's been saying this isn't my problem throughout this movie. I think it was 2 times he said that. And it was just a callback to Spider-Man 1. And he was like, you missed me where that was my problem. And there was another one when he was going to send all of them back. And he was like, this isn't my problem, but you're not supposed to be here. So I'm going to have to send you back, when he was talking to all the Spider-Man. Tobey and Andrew, before they, you know, MJ pulled the cube back and listened to what they had to say. But
it's mad at him over because it recalls Tobey Maguire Peter's fateful decision not to intervene, which led to Uncle Ben's death.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
Yep.
J. Jonah Jameson's upgraded Daily Bugle show, which is really thanks to his Spider-Man coverage, now pushes supplements, which is another jab at Alex Jones. The Chiron reads, "Why does Spider-Man hate national monuments?" recalling the Washington Monument and Homecoming and Tower Bridge in Far From Home. Meanwhile, Otto Octavius recalls the moment he warped, saying he had Spider-Man by the throat, so this must have happened right before Tobey changed him in this moment in the film.
These things have turned you into something you're not. Don't listen to them. It was my dream.
Sometimes, to do what's right, we have to be steady and give up the thing we want the most, even our dreams.
You're right.
Meanwhile, Max talks about being absorbed into the grid, about to turn into pure energy, recalling the Amazing Spider-Man 2 when Peter and Gwen hardwired Electro to that grid and overloaded his chip. And then Lizard asks Max if he dies, but he never gets an answer, and that's because Lizard doesn't actually die in the 2012 film. He ends up locked up and approached to join a future Sinister Six. So Strange shows them the box, the Machina Dichotomus, in Latin roughly the division machine, which he could use to send them back to their universes. But Peter and Strange debate over this. Strange says, in the grand calculus of the multiverse, their sacrifice means infinitely more than their lives. The subtext, of course, being his guilt for sacrificing Tony Stark as part of his complex calculus from seeing 14,605 future outcomes to defeat Thanos. If you think about it, calculus was also the type of arithmetic on He Who Remains chalkboard. And I just find it interesting that Peter overcomes Strange by doing simpler geometry. It's still super nerdy, just not overthinking it, doing as much 4D chess as those guys are. So Peter snatches the box and Strange pursues them, trapping him between portals so that
sequence was amazing.
I love it. But then he brings Peter back to push his astral soul from his physical body, similar to how the Ancient One did to him. However, Peter's soulless physical body still manages to evade Strange. Interesting.
And you
this
can
must
see the
be a
lines in
higher
his head.
form of the Spidey sense, which would be a neurological reflex that is divorced from Peter's conscious mind, but it also shows us how this is really linked to a kind of metaphysical magic. And later in the movie, Andrew Garfield Peter does say magic's real here too. So he might.
Yes, I was like, magic is real here too. I'm like, bro, what? When did that even become a thing? Because we did not know magic existed. If it was anybody that we could have thought magic could have existed, was in Tobey Maguire's whole run, because they was like, oh, you know, what they said, Doctor Strange. We could call Doc Ock Doctor Strange, but it's already been taken. So if it was magic in any universe, we would have thought it was freaking his universe. We would have thought it was Peter Parker, Tobey Maguire's universe, not Andrew. But when he came out of there, he was like, this is that displacement or whatever. And he was like, oh shit, magic real here too. I'm like, what? What do you mean here too? And I don't know why nobody in the theater didn't pop when he said that. But I don't know.
Be aware of that link as well. Strange sends the cloak of levitation after Peter, giving us that what if Spider-Man became this. Andrew Garfield Peter does say magic's real here too, so he might be aware of that link as well. Strange sends the cloak of levitation after Peter, giving us that what if Spider-Man became the Sorcerer Supreme image from the comics that we also saw in the zombie episode of What If. I love this detail. On a nearby newsstand are People magazines with Liz Allen, Peter's crush from Spider-Man Homecoming, daughter to Adrian Toomes' Vulture, calling in the zombie episode of What If. I love this detail. On a nearby newsstand are People magazines with Liz Allen, Peter's crush from Spider-Man Homecoming, daughter to Adrian Toomes' Vulture, calling Peter a liar, showing us that family, including Vulture, is still somewhere in the multiverse and gonna show up in Morbius. Don't know how that's gonna make sense. Strange traps Peter in the mirror, calling Peter a liar.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. I don't understand if this is back to normal now. How is Morbius, which comes out next month? They're gonna have to explain some stuff.
Showing us that family, including Vulture, is still somewhere in the multiverse and gonna show up in Morbius. Don't know how that's gonna make sense. Strange traps Peter in the mirror dimension. The VFX are incredible. Peter tumbles past the High Line in New York City, which Kate Bishop actually just recommended to Yelena in Hawkeye. He tumbles through a department store where you can hear Christmas music playing. Peter tumbles toward the Bethesda fountain in Central Park. It actually looks like the Angel of Water statue might have, like the Statue of Liberty, been swapped out for an Avenger. Strange traps Peter in an endless loop of portals, creating the illusion of infinite Spider-Men, as there are.
Now this was hilarious because this reminded me when Loki came in what was it, Thor Ragnarok, and he just kept falling through, but we couldn't see him, but he was just falling forever. But I don't know, that part when you just saw him keep falling just made me think about that.
And then Peter recognizes from the Archimedean spiral that he can geometry the shit out of this and trap Strange in a web of math. Norman offers to help Peter, saying, you know, I'm something of a scientist myself.
Yo, the whole theater cracked up when he said that. I was dying laughing. The whole theater was cracking up when he said that.
Of course, his line from the 2002 movie,
you know, I'm something of a scientist myself.
Peter and
And the way he did it, his inflection look and sound the same.
Ned do their recurring handshake, and it ends with the sling ring sparking a bit, a little sign that Ned does have a kind of inner magic to him. Peter takes them to Happy's condo. The security feed glitches as Electro passes from its interference, and then Otto snaps, "I don't need fixing, especially by some teenager using scraps in a bachelor's junk drawer." It's
scraps. The way he says scraps reminds me back of Iron Man 1. He said Tony Stark built a suit with a bunch of scraps. So that's when he said that, that's what popped in my head.
not a drawer full of scraps, it's a
bunch of scraps.
Yes.
On the walls of Happy's room, you can actually see the name Slott. That's a reference to longtime Spider-Man writer Dan Slott. Peter activates a Stark Tech fabricator. We saw this kind of device used on the Stark jet to design his new suit in Far From Home. It's powered by an arc reactor. This is a familiar design. This is the new Element arc reactor Mark I with
Well, see, I didn't understand that because I swore that was the same arc reactor that Tony threw away at the end of Spider-Man 3, at the end of Iron Man 3. So was there an arc reactor just laying around that we just didn't know about?
the triangular inlay that Tony Stark constructed using the new element he rediscovered in Iron Man 2. I love that this is the era of arc reactor he used because in Spider-Man Homecoming, they specifically had the Mark 42 armor that
Oh, so there were multiple arc reactors. Because I know he made it in 2, but I thought he threw it away in 3. Well, apparently he had a whole bunch of them.
Tony Stark constructed using the new element he rediscovered in Iron Man 2. I love that this is the era of arc reactor he used because in Spider-Man Homecoming, they specifically had the Mark 42 armor that was using that same generation of arc reactor from Iron Man 3 on the Stark jet. So that would be the one that Happy still has in his possession. Meanwhile, Otto and May share some water in the kitchen. They did briefly date in the comics. Then Peter designs a new inhibitor trip for Doc Ock to replace the one that got fried in the 2004 film. And he puts in place these 6 needles that go into Otto's skin and fuse with the spinal cord. I love how they use the same exact production design from the Raimi film Ock to replace the one that got fried in the 2004 film. And he puts in place these 6 needles that go into Otto's skin and fuse with the spinal cord. I love how they use the same exact production design from the Raimi films for all of these pieces of technology. They really clearly did their homework to look at how all of these things function. At this point, the red lights on Doc Ock's claws flicker back to bluish white, and he transfers the nanotech back to Peter to give him this golden spider, 8 arms, just like his own. It's like giving him a badge of honor there. Otto encourages his buddy Norman that he's about to rid himself of his darker half, but Norman faces.
Now this is where I think happened. When he said that, that's when I believe they were like, Norman's on sabbatical, honey. I'm sorry, that's just so funny when that happened.
And away from him says, just me. And Dafoe uses his darker Goblin voice in this moment, meaning it is only Goblin in his mind right now. And so Peter's Spidey sense kicks in and he just kind of wanders around the condo. It's super creepy, and notice as it begins, the first person to appear in his periphery is Norman Osborn. And the first thing Peter says is, May. It's his instinct telling him that Norman will pose a fatal threat to May. And so Peter whips Norman to dummy, which as they came into the condo, you can see Norman in the background casing. So Goblin makes his case to the other villains. These are not curses, these are gifts. Recalling the final lines of the 2002 film, the lesson that Tobey Maguire Peter learned.
This is my gift, my curse.
When Peter had to rationalize his powers as both a gift and a curse, the fight breaks out. Peter punches Goblin, and Goblin just smiles more and more. He is loving it.
Yo, that whole sequence was brutal. That whole sequence from that apartment to the bottom of the apartment building, that whole sequence was brutal. When he power bombed him through the... Man, I'm sorry. And Goblin just taking it. And you gotta remember, he took some version of the super soldier serum in his universe, because whatever that was, I wonder if that will cure. Anyway, that's a whole nother story.
Combat is just so brutal. Apparently Willem Dafoe insisted on doing as many stunts as he could himself. And downstairs, Goblin's glider strikes May, and now that creepy face is covered in a Hobgoblin style hood, and he tosses a pumpkin bomb, which Peter bats away, showing how this Goblin is just as willing to bomb an Aunt May as he was in the 2002 film. And as she dies, May says the immortal words of Uncle Ben, with great power, there must also come great responsibility. Yeah, there was a slight rewording, and that's because she said the original original comic wording of the line that includes "there must also come" directly from Stan Lee. Folks, that hit hard.
Yeah,
so to cheer us up, Ned uses the sling ring to port.
That hit really hard. I'm sorry. Yeah, it took me out. But then this brought me back in. Like, it didn't take me out. It took me a moment to gather my shit together. It hit harder the second time. The first time it didn't hit that hard. It's the second time that hit harder because we knew, you know, so I don't know.
To one of the other Peter Parkers currently in this universe, Spider-Man Andrew Garfield, a guy no one will ever believe again in interviews. Notice the music in this moment is actually James Horner's Young Peter theme from the Amazing Spider-Man film in 2012. And we just gotta pause and appreciate how great the Andrew Garfield era of the Spider-Man suit was. I mean, it's definitely my favorite aesthetically.
The first one or the second one? Was it this? Yeah, it's the first one. It was the first one.
Great shade of blue, huge eyes, and a true DIY practicality to it. One thing that era nailed. But then Ned portals again, and Tobey Maguire Peter Parker steps in. His entrance set to Danny Elfman's Spider-Man theme. And we gotta credit both Maguire and Garfield for so deftly slipping back into their mannerisms. Tobey is preemptively polite and dopey. Andrew,
he did the hide. The way he did hide, I was like, yo, he did the same thing in Spider-Man, the first one, when he was saying hey to Mary Jane or whatnot. I don't know.
Drew is post-mistake apologetic and super chatty. And I also like how their first instinct upon seeing each other is to thwip attack, as if the last time either of these guys encountered a doppelganger, it might have been a hostile situation. Tobey Peter says that he liked to hang out atop the Chrysler building, as we saw his Peter perch in the Raimi films. Andrew Peter says he liked the Empire State Building for the view, but they find Peter on the rooftop of his school in Queens. It's not about the view, it's about a refuge from his high school life, because he never moved into the city. Andrew Peter starts to say he has some understanding of losing someone, of course referring to letting Gwen Stacy die, and he goes on to describe what happened after Gwen's death, how he stopped pulling his punches and got rageful and bitter. So apparently in that Garfield continuity, this Spider-Man might have straight up killed people, which is an insane revelation. I'm gonna explore all that in another video. But Tobey Peter recounts the vengeance that he felt that led him to track down Uncle Ben's murderer, and how in Spider-Man 3 that wound was reopened with Flint Marko and exacerbated by Venom, a critical lesson that he had to learn. And all three recognize the words "with great power comes great responsibility," making that proverb a kind of constant absolute point among all the Spider-Men. They return to the high school and work together to engineer cures for all of them. I love how nerdy the second half of
and they did the Spider-Man meme in there. That did it. They did the pointing.
This movie is. Tobey Peter tells Ned that his best friend died in his arms after trying to kill him, referring to Harry Osborn in Spider-Man 3. Meanwhile, Tobey Peter tells Andrew Peter that he and Mary Jane eventually made it work. Ned calls her Peter, and all three of them look up, confusedly pointing at each other. Of course, a nod to the meme. Awesome. And Tobey Peter shows how his webbing, unlike the...
That was funny. I'm sorry. I know he ain't gonna show it, but when he did the webbing, he was like, you can't do that, can you? Andrew's reaction was so funny. He's like, how on earth does... I'm like, and nobody reacted to Andrew's reaction to Tobey's. Oh my God. But
he and Mary Jane eventually made it work. Ned calls her Peter, and all three of them look up, confusedly pointing at each other. Of course, a nod to the meme. Awesome. And Tobey Peter shows how his webbing, unlike the others who use mechanical web shooters, comes freakishly out of his wrists. I love how Andrew plays super grossed out, and even when Tom Holland moves the conversation along, he even continues staring at Tobey's wrist for a beat before he's like, oh, okay, yeah, what? And then on to the showdown at the steps.
He's like, how does that even, you're right, Tom did move it on. He was like, how does that even... It's the science in him trying to figure out.
Statue of Liberty. Tobey Peter's back tenses up, a callback to Peter hurting his back in the 2004 film, which itself was an inside joke about how Tobey nearly sit out of the sequel after hurting his back on Seabiscuit, and then Andrew cracks it for him for once cracking someone's backbone without killing them. Tobey talks about how he fought...
That was so wrong. Why did you do that? That was so wrong.
A joke about how Tobey nearly sit out of the sequel after hurting his back on Seabiscuit, and then Andrew cracks it for him for once cracking someone's backbone without killing them. Tobey talks about how he fought an alien made out of black goo, of course referring to Venom, his Eddie Brock played by Topher Grace, and setting up Tom Hardy Venom's arrival in the post-credit scene. And then Tom Holland Peter talks about how he fought Thanos, and then Andrew's like, oh, I'm lame. I only fought a Russian guy in a rhinoceros suit, of course referring to Paul Giamatti's Rhino. But I love it. Tobey Peter talks him up, saying he's actually amazing, giving Andrew Garfield the credit he deserves. Despite his amazing Spider-Man era, often ranked the lowest by fans, he's still amazing, and now he's got his brothers. But I love how the first time these Peters try to work together, it totally fails, since they are more used to being solo acts. So while Andrew and Tobey teach Tom how to mourn and to forgive, Tom teaches them the one thing his era of Spider-Man had that theirs didn't: cooperation with superheroes more powerful than he is. At one point, Tobey just straight up screams, "How is this helping?" And
thank you, somebody point that out, because he was like, I'm part of Avenger. He was like, I was part of the Avengers. He said, oh, cool. What is that? Because they don't have that. And then he's trying to explain to him. He's like, how is this helping? Bully Maguire has come out. That's what that felt like.
Tom teaches them the one thing his era of Spider-Man had that theirs didn't: cooperation with superheroes more powerful than he is. At one point, Tobey just straight up screams, "How is this helping?" And Andrew Peter asks if the Avengers are a band, calling back when Bruce Banner asks if the Avengers broke up like the Beatles.
The Avengers broke up. We're toast.
Like a band? Like the Beatles?
But they're able to figure it out, and a little subtle detail here that
You better say it when he spun around and pushed Thor, like web sling the other two Spider-Mans in front of them, so that Tobey lands first, Andrew land third, and then Tom land last because of the order of their movies. And just that whole sequence of when they were swinging in was amazing. So I hope you bring that up, Eric.
Loved during their heroic swing, Tom Holland Peter whips to his two brothers to sling them back up with him, so that the three of them can leap together off the Statue of Liberty head right at Electro and Sandman and Lizard. Meanwhile, you see how Electro's bolts at one point fire up in a star shape around.
Now, I hope he shows this. There's a part in here when Spider-Man was coming and he did this Super Saiyan, like he was looking, right? Like he is. And then he disappears and turns around as Spider-Man was coming in. And I don't know if anyone's noticed that in the theaters. He was looking and then he just blips. He was like, blips, and then he's facing the other Spider-Man. I don't know if they're going to show that, but that was a nice sequence that he had that. I hope they show that.
On his head like Electro's mask in the comics. Tobey Peter manages to revert Thomas Hayden's Church Flint Marco. I love how that device lights up and spins the same way the Super Collider did in Spider-Man 3. Then Lizard jumps into the portal with Ned and MJ, thrashing around that science lab, evoking that school battle in the 2012 film. But then Doc Ock helps them fix Electro, and they hit Lizard with the same serum gas that they used as the reigning antidote at the end of the 2012 movie, reverting him to Rhys Ifans' Dr. Connors. And Max Dillon tells Andrew Garfield Peter that he thought he was going to be black, and that there's got to be a black Spider-Man somewhere out there, definitely setting up Miles Morales to step up sometime soon, hopefully, since we do know from Aaron Davis's lines in Homecoming that Miles Morales does exist in the MCU.
I don't want those weapons in this neighborhood. I got a nephew who live here. Yeah, sorry, Miles. I'm not gonna make it.
Then Green Goblin dives in, snarling, "Can the Spider-Man come out to play?" Calling back his creepy line to Tobey Maguire Peter over the phone in the 2002 film.
Can Spider-Man come out to play?
And he bombs the box, causing the spell to spill out around Liberty Island. I love how the VFX caused that tear to turn something that should be in the deep background feel like a canvas that is way closer to us. And in this chaos, MJ slips and falls from the scaffolding, the framing exactly matching Gwen Stacy's slow-mo death drop in 2014, scaring the hell out of all of us. Tom Holland Peter dives after her, but he gets swiped by Goblin, so it's up to Andrew Garfield Peter to step up to catch her, redeeming his failure to save Gwen, but they do it in a really cool way, because notice this time he focuses more on the leap itself to catch her in his arms instead of trying to snatch her with his webbing, all to avoid that whiplash.
Bro, will you stop doing it? Was not whiplash. She mashed her head at the bottom of the... She smashed her head, bro. Go back and look. You can hear the thump. It's not whiplash. Her skull should be mush.
That actually caused Gwen to die, proving that this poor guy has been obsessing over that decision every day of his life, and that is why he sobs in relief finally. We get another little sorcerer set up for Ned when proving that this put more on the leap itself.
When he picked him up, when he picked her up, everybody in the theater was like, yes, and then it went from that to, oh, because he, she was like, are you okay? You could see it.
To catch her in his arms instead of trying to snatch her with his webbing, all to avoid that whiplash that actually caused Gwen to die, proving that this poor guy has been obsessing over that decision every day of his life, and that is why he sobs in relief finally. We get another little sorcerer set up for Ned when the cloak of levitation catches him. We actually get a little leitmotif of Doctor Strange's theme music there too. Get this man a cloak. And then on the fallen giant Captain America shield, Tom Holland, Peter.
Yo, I'm sorry, like, Green Goblin didn't even have a chance here. Like, he got his ass whooped. Like, Tom was pulling his punches back when they were at the apartment. And you know, one thing he didn't bring out that was so visceral about that fight scene is when after before he went outside. So when Goblin was fighting him and he was punching him in the face or whatnot, and he did that knee joint or whatever, and he was punching him in his face and he got knocked to the ground, Tom flips to the window and yanked it out. Like, it was that whole visceral, like, he went outside, like, he was hurt, but he didn't even talk about that. I just thought about that whole sequence. And then he went outside, and then Lizard came and threw him back in, talking about, you know, there's always something. I can't remember the line, but anyway, we're going back to this. It just made me think about that, because now I felt like he was pulling his punches then, but now he wasn't pulling his punches now, because if you've seen the movie, you know Tom was going in.
And Goblin to get out, and it is vicious. Peter prepares to kill Goblin, lifting his glider to bring down on him the same way Captain America nearly killed Iron Man in Civil War, using the tool that Peter is now standing on. This kid is
you know what's so crazy? Goblin was about to get stabbed again with his own glider, but Tobey is like, no, you know, because it's ironic, because Spider-Man 1, the first one, he gets stabbed with his own glider, and he's about to get stabbed again. But then Tobey comes in to try to save him. And it's just seeing how far he has come. And he was like, no, we're here to save them all. You know, so
moments away from going full John Walker, but Tobey Maguire Peter jumps in, grabs the glider, even though Tom Holland Peter shoves that glider even closer to him. Ultimately,
we all know Tobey is the strongest one of all of them. He don't need web fluid. I'll say it in a minute, but look, even when he's pushing down on him, he's still holding it.
He helps him see the light and to make a different choice, and so Tom Holland proves his change by hitting Norman with the anti-serum and giving him...
Oh, he didn't tell him? Okay, so Norman stabs Tobey, and I'm like, well, Tobey been stabbed plenty of times, so, I mean, yeah.
Him a second chance. Meanwhile, the sky opens up to dozens of glowing silhouettes, presumably other characters who know Peter Parker is Spider-Man from...
I saw Rhino, I saw Scorpion, I saw Kraven. That's all I saw. I didn't see anybody else. So I thought I saw Black Cat. I thought I saw Black Cat up there too. When I saw it on my third time. But
from other universes, one of them holds a spear, looks like Kraven the Hunter. Others match the shape of Rhino. There's another one that kind of looks like Scorpion. I'm gonna go deeper into these in another video too. So Peter and Doctor Strange realize that the only way to seal up these cracks is to
say Black Cat. Black Cat was standing next to Kraven.
The memory wipe spell as it was intended, meaning everyone will forget Peter is Spider-Man. Notice how, whereas the runes before were thinner, more rushed written, here they are bolder and more authoritative, like the runes cast by Scarlet Witch in the WandaVision final battle. So Tobey and Andrew make their final goodbyes, and Tobey says, it's what we do, recalling how Aunt May justified why you should help people. And Peter explains it all to MJ, and he promises he will come find her. Just reminds me a lot of that theme from Eternal Sunshine, how love is too powerful of a force to be bound by memory, and MJ tells Peter that she loves him, but she doesn't let him say it back to her, wagering that the first time he can say it to her on the other side, it'll be so pure and real that that could be the thing that awakens her. And then so, after the spell is complete, the world continues to know that Spider-Man exists, but the name Peter Parker means nothing to them. This is crazy, because it means that Ned and MJ still made it into MIT, but with no physical evidence of Peter Parker's history with them. So in addition to brainwashing everyone's memories, this spell must also have warped all of reality to erase documents, any kind of digital records, any physical mark that Peter Parker left on the world.
That guy. Why didn't they show this person? Like, who is this person? This person didn't even show up in the movie.
world. I mean, does the guy have a birth certificate? A social security card? I would say that that should have to necessitate a new history to be conjured to replace the Peter history that was erased. But, and I hate to point this out, but if you think about it, Peter was often absent from his major events in his life, from his homecoming dance, from his field trips, from his school competitions. He was blipped for 5 years. It's depressing to realize this, but his erasure is not that disruptive to his friends' lives. I mean, essentially, this just means MJ and Ned spent more of their teenage years alone, which for MJ, reading a book by herself is just kind of who she is. Ned tinkering with his Legos is who he is. I mean, yeah, it's sadder the more you think about it, but it's true. That's why Peter makes this sacrifice, because he knows his loved ones can get by without him. And so when he finds them back in the Peter Pan coffee shop, himself a kind of Peter Pan stuck watching kids grow up and move on without him. However, MJ still wears the Black Dahlia necklace. So somewhere deep down, she still loves him. And the coffee cup she gives him reads, "We are happy to serve you," a cup that he holds on to remind himself to serve. By the way, we actually saw the Sanctum Apprentice with one of those coffee cups earlier when she was trying to fix that same artifact that Thor also broke in Ragnarok. That cup also showed up on the dashboard of the Tracksuit Mafia in Hawkeye episode 5, and Peter almost says to MJ,
bro, if there's a cameo of Tom Holland, if you want to make this full circle, have Tom Holland make a cameo looking at Wilson Fisk, like have him just as a silhouette and just watching over Wilson Fisk. That's it. That's how you end off this. That's how you end it off.
"I love you," but he stops himself and he waits upon seeing the Band-Aid because he doesn't want to hurt MJ anymore. So to protect her, for now, he walks away. Peter visits May's grave. You'll notice the flowers cover the birth.
He looks similar to how Andrew was at the graveyard. I want to say it's the same graveyard that Gwen died at in TASM 2 because it looks similar.
And death dates. I guess because, as Tony Stark observed when he first met May in Civil War, we never do quite know how old May is. Happy shows up, doesn't know who Peter is, but he compares this feeling to losing Tony. And Peter sets up his new apartment. I am praying that they can find a way to make Mr. Ditkovich his landlord. You'll notice he has a GED test prep book, and that's because this guy has no academic record anymore. Also, we see he sets up his Palpatine Lego, which was the first we saw of Ned Leeds back in Homecoming. And he wears a new suit with brighter blues and swings out
the original Spider-Man costume
out past 30 Rockefeller Center, where the upcoming finale of Hawkeye will be set. I don't think we'll see Spider-Man swinging in the background of that, but a guy can dream. Being a stranger to the community Peter Parker relied on is so painful, but it does force this kid to mature into the selfless hero that his forebears showed him how to be. At times, the life of a hero is a lonely one, but all those people are still there, and they may not remember, but they still love him. And one day, he will find his way home. That is everything I found in this heart-wrenching and beautiful Spider-Man film, but there's so much more I want to say about this movie, so to support our channel and help us do that, please check out one of those great merch options at newrockstarsmerch.com. That strange entitlement design is calling to you. Marvel, thank you for watching.
New Rockstars did a good job on the breakdown. I really wish he would have did more about the silhouette of the people, all the villains or all the people that knew who Peter Parker was that were coming through, because I swear I saw Black Cat up there. And I knew that was Kraven the Hunter, but it looks like Black Cat was next to Kraven the Hunter. You could clearly see Rhino and Scorpion, but I want to know what else he saw, because that's the only thing I could see within the 3 viewings that I've seen the movie already. And that is it. That is my reaction to New Rockstars breakdown to Spider-Man No Way Home. Hey, they did an awesome job. Make sure y'all go check them out. But hey, happy holidays to y'all. Tell somebody you love them. I will see y'all guys and gals on the next video or stream. Deuces.